I called myself a lefty libertarian, which means that I grew up Catholic with this extreme sort of sense of social responsibility, but at the same time had fiscally conservative attitudes, with regard to the size of government. And so when I ran the weekly, people always assumed that I was a communist. And if we went after somebody who was a Republican, that was, of course, their first line of defense. You don't believe in Jesus, you're obviously a homosexual, and you're a communist.
And you're burning.
Pardon?
And you're really burning.
And I'm really burning, yeah. So that story is important only insofar as it was while I was running this ostensibly lefty publication that I began to really look at the problem of pensions in Orange County at the city level and at the county level. And that's when my attitude toward public safety employee unions especially really was transformed. I was used to voting in part, I admit this now, on the basis of who was backing a candidate. If the cops and firefighters backed a candidate, I assumed, well, these guys must know, they're our heroes, right? So I would almost invariably end up pulling the lever for that candidate. What I learned as a reporter, starting to look at the problem of their pay, was that especially toward the end of the 90s and into the early 2000s, and especially after 9/11, cops and firefighters, corrections unions all became part of the heroes of 911, right? They were the guys who rushed into burning buildings. They were the thin blue line. They saved us from every challenge to civilization. What I learned, however, was that we were promising these people and their civilian counterparts, we were promising them retirement benefits that I found, could not possibly afford. This started for me when I was looking at the city of Costa Mesa. Some of you guys might remember that finally in about 2010, a conservative group took over the council majority in Costa Mesa. And the reason I bring them up is because that's where this idea that it was sort of blooming in me really became, into full flower. I was looking at the public employee unions, and especially the cops and firefighters, who were telling the people of Costa Mesa that if this conservative majority got in, and if they tried to reform the pension system of Costa Mesa, they would trigger a catastrophe in the city. Cops would leave, firefighters would no longer put out fires, employees would go to wealthier cities or poorer cities that offered better benefits. It would be Armageddon. It would be a disaster. And I watched as public employee unions really launched a campaign of propaganda, the likes of which I'd never seen. You guys might remember a tragic moment when a kid jumped off, who was a city employee, climbed to the top of City Hall and jumped off. And the union immediately said, well, he jumped off because he knew that the layoffs were coming. Turned out, months later, patient minds and inquiring minds discovered the kid was high on cocaine when he jumped. He was a drug addict. He had serious personal problems. But none of this mattered. By then, the kid had been canonized as a sort of a saint leading the Revolutionary Guard in Costa Mesa. And it went on like that. What you could also find out was that the average pay the median pay of a family in Costa Mesa was around $42,000 per year. That was a family income, $42,000. Not a lot of money in Orange County. The median income for firefighters in the same city, they were under the Orange County Fire Authority, so they were county firefighters. Back then, the average pay for a firefighter was just under $200,000. Today, it is around $236,000. That's their median pay.
Per family or fireman?
Per fireman, yeah.
So overtime?
I don't know. I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to that. I know that we just did the analysis. That's a great question. I have to go dig in and look at it. All I know is that's pay and benefits. That includes the contribution. It does include overtime? Okay. So, yeah, it is a lot of overtime. Now, one of their arguments, of course, is that they need the overtime because if they actually add another firefighter, that person gets 100% of the benefit. Whereas if you keep the existing firefighter and just use it for overtime, you're kind of spreading out the cost. But the fact is, these guys are portraying themselves as the only people who could possibly do this job. We know that there's about 1,200 applicants for every single firefighting job opening. It's remarkable how many people would love that kind of challenge in their lives. Meanwhile, we send young men and women over to Afghanistan or Iraq, and we pay them minimally, put them in harm's way, put them in command of lethal weapons. We give them 6 to 9 weeks of training, and when they come back, we sometimes give them a swift kick in the keister and say, thanks for your service. So there's a radical imbalance here between the way in which we treat some people in our society and those we treat, you know, who are in our fire departments. So I watched that system and then went off to go join a national news organization, nonprofit one, where we looked at the same issues. This is going on all over the country. And anytime anybody raises this issue of the problem of public employee pension liability, the same response from the same people comes back at you. It doesn't matter whether the public officials are Republicans or Democrats, if they are backed by these unions, their response is invariably, you don't like our heroes, you gotta pay for this quality service, and if you won't, your house is gonna be burgled and then burned down. That's how it's gonna work. So one of the ways that we've seen this roll out in Orange County more recently, I was just looking at the city of Stanton, one of our neighbors, and in Stanton, and I'm gonna get to your city here in just one sec. In Stanton, I was attracted to that city because it's the poorest city in Orange County. It's also it's one of the poorest cities in Orange County. It's one of the most violent. I think it's like in the top 5 of most violent cities in Orange County. It's the smallest city. It's about 3.1 square miles. You guys may know it is like a blur when you drive down Beach Boulevard. It literally is about 6 blocks along Beach. They have recently gone through 2 declared near bankruptcies, let's call them, because they never fully declared it, but their fiscal situation was in such utter disarray that they finally persuaded the public there to vote for a sales tax. They are now one of 2 cities in Orange County to have a sales tax. The other one is, anybody know?
Wow.
Very good, wow! See, I asked my wife that, she has no idea. La Habra. La Habra has a half cent?
He knows.
She knows. La Habra has a 1/2 cent sales tax, 0.5%, and Stanton has a 1% sales tax. So they're the only cities in Orange County. 34 cities in Orange County. We have 2 with sales taxes. One of them is Stanton. And who led the fight down there? A Republican led the fight for the tax. For the tax. The same Republican who is now leading the charge to get the city's Central Park done. It's going to open in 2 months. That Central Park, they said, was going to cost $6 million. Then they said 7.5, then 8.5, then 11.5. I just calculated it. If you put in the bonds, which they never do, they never talk about the bonds, you're talking about wanting the whole picture about debt in a city. You've got pension liability, healthcare, retirement benefits, plus bonds, right? You might be able to think of others. Those are the ones that occurred in Stanton. So you've got the public employee pensions, you've got a city in financial crisis, you've got a new sales tax that's supposed to pay off some of these things. And meanwhile, we've now got a $24 million Central Park. This would make it one of the most, if not the, I'm trying to calculate against the great park in my city of Irvine, another boondoggle. But this one is $24 million. How did I arrive at that? It's the bond debt. They sold bonds against redevelopment property, and they are going to pay, additionally, over that $24 million, they're going to pay $2 million per year in interest, between $1.5 and $2 million per year. At the same time, they had to raise the sales tax. Why? Because there are built-in cost of living adjustments for cops and firefighters. This year, those costs are $1.1 million. The sales tax will raise $1.2 million, just keeping them barely ahead of that cost, but nowhere near being able to pay for their Central Park. So one of the things that I would ask you guys to consider, and you probably already have, is the question that, I'm sorry, what's your name, sir?
Dwight.
Dwight. The question that Dwight asked, which is, what is the total liability here? What is the total, and some of you guys may already know this answer. Does anybody know the answer to that question, by the way? No? It's a really interesting one, and look for the tax to be proposed here soon in order to pay this off, because
We had it proposed.
you do have it.
No, we had it proposed by the ex-city manager that left to cover this, and Marty fought it, and we didn't end up having it. I
Sorry,
think it was
Marty?
a cent. One
Because he
cent.
wanted to put a 1%
Marty's
sales
on the
tax
council.
And it's been brought up a couple of times, including a new business license fee. And it's just not,
It was around
not putting it on.
2010, I want, same time, same
Yeah.
issue.
Yes.
Got me convinced that I should support it as a business owner, property owner, not appreciating where we were. I didn't know the deep hole because I listened to him telling me we were in great shape. Until I stuck my nose in it, didn't appreciate where we really are.
Right.
And the register at that time was behind the curve on Brea's hole. Like in the last 18 months, they've done some good work on identifying where everybody is and that we're in the bottom
Got it.
3.
Yeah.
But that was.
I don't see a 1% sales tax going on a ballot here anytime.
I don't see that either.
That's amazing. Now, just out of curiosity, because you guys know more about this than I do, obviously.
Not me.
On this issue, I guarantee you will. What is your anniversary? No. Next year. Good man. So, when the sales tax is proposed here, or in Stanton, it went like this. It was utility. It was, we're going to go bankrupt. We need a utility tax. Utility tax is refuted. We're going to go bankrupt. Simultaneously, in the background, we're pushing for this park. By the way, in the background, this is like really under the table stuff almost. And we're near insolvency, the city manager says, and then we get the sales tax, and that's when the cops and the sheriffs, pardon me, and the firefighters contribute about $40,000 to the Yes Yes campaign, and they launch their propaganda war, very much like the one down in Costa Mesa. And it is, I was just reading some articles today from that period. If we don't get the sales tax, we're going to have to lay off 3 firefighters. That's the only way we can make this work. And of course, in the background, they're negotiating this deal to build a park, right? But they don't talk about that. Did something like that happen in concert with did you see police, firefighters, other public employees? They didn't do anything.
He threatened we were going to have to lay off people from City Hall, from city.
Yeah, I don't think that one works
That was
as well
his
with the
threat.
public. Yeah. That one, I'm just
So
guessing.
actually, if you're looking to look at another city that's gonna look at a 1% sales tax,
Yeah.
it'll be Placentia.
That's what I hear.
Two
And of course,
cents.
they just had the big arrest last week, right?
They're gonna have a
big
tough time selling it after somebody takes out,
$3.4 million.
$4.2 million.
Oh, they're now
Then
4.2.
they're gonna ask for people to give money to, they're in trouble.
They were in deep trouble. They were already in trouble, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
Wow.
yeah, I think they went into this year with a $60,000 surplus in their budget.
60,000?
They have a $6 million annual hole to figure out.
Wow.
We had one of the highest paid city managers in all of Orange County.
For 40,000 people.
You may be reading about this gentleman soon.
Oh, really? Oh, I can't wait.
We're hoping
Actually,
shopping.
You won't wanna miss it.
Actually, neither can I.
I'm so totally in a room full of geeks. I love
I was
this.
gonna say, you're not the only one looking forward to it.
Yeah. No, it's nice to be among my own kind. We are really tourists, aren't we, or aliens or something?
Our city did a similar, or their,
I used to argue
his
about some of that stuff.
game was to create enterprise opportunities as a government, and so he opened an IT department. We didn't just have IT for our city, we had a $6 million IT employee business that sold IT services to other cities.
Oh my
We didn't
gosh.
hire a street sweeping company, we opened a street sweeping business.
And subsidized.
Everything was, and so he had these honey pots all over.
We're putting street sweeping out.
We were the Yorba Linda, okay,
You don't have to leave
we're the
it.
Yorba Linda police for 40 years, so we were billing 11 million, they replaced it with 8, but, which
So
is,
they paid 8 for an $11 million service?
now the sheriffs got the contract for 8. They had a DA on their council that hated our city manager and whatever, and they replaced it. We lowered our bid to 8.5. He bumbled it, but he tried to keep it. But the truth is, our horrible pension hole was driven by that contract where it looked like we were supposedly making money every year, but obviously we weren't. We didn't get that pension for nothing.
Right.
And he
Right.
was pretending he was some titan, and we got left with the,
Oh, boy.
but that's what was, our little city was in some weird way this conglomerate that he ran.
That's going to be a fascinating story.
It's
Is there any particular place I should look for this story? I guess my local major daily newspaper?
I was gonna hire the
That
blip.
would work fine.
Okay, we'll do that.
No, it's,
Well, we had published the analysis of the costs of IT in several cities all around.
well, here's
the
the frosting on the cake. 90 years ago, Brea and La Habra started a water business, Cal Domestic Water, so that the people in the city could drink water and not worry about it. He got on the board of it and collected multi-6 figures in benefits, separate from his city manager's
Oh my
salary,
gosh.
and never disclosed it. Never filled out his annual forms, nothing. for 94 years, this co-op priced water and we bought it and that was the end of it. He decided, after 94 years, that we should buy water rights as a city. And in 30 months, we spent $31 million for bonds that in some cases were floated in 30 days and funded and came through, so that we had prudently invested in our future, so we had water. And for these water rights, you get a discounted rate, but it's dictated to you what that is. Not knowing, so then the question begs, and council approved these all unanimously.
I'm just asking one question, can I get your card afterward to call
Sure.
you on this? Because I gotta run through some
Nope,
other stuff
sorry.
real quickly, and he's gonna leave, but I do wanna, do you have a card or something that I can get afterward?
Chris has it.
I'll get your card from Chris, thank you. White, right?
You'll like this story.
I think I will. Sounds like one of mine, it's great.
But don't forget, some of us
Hi,
have some
sorry I'm late.
So, no, please. So,
Really?
let me just back up just a wee bit here. I work for California Transparency, I'm sorry, for California Policy Center. We do the California Transparency Project. If you've been online, you can find public employee pay figures and benefit figures at the California Transparency Project. Transparent California is the name of the website. And California Policy Center was started by a guy named Ed Ring. I used Ed all the time back in the day, not really knowing who he was. I thought California Policy Center was some massive organization. It was just Ed, just breaking down numbers on pension funds, pay and benefits for public employees. So this transparency project that we're working on includes at the local level now, we've got a website set up where we're actually generating real-time, as real as we can be on these kinds of things, the finances of every city in California, every city and county. So that's, what do we have, 50, you'll know this, Chris, 58 counties, is that right? Somebody will know this here. Almost 500 cities, about 58 counties. So we've got all the finances in there. So we've got, their general fund amounts, so we've got their pension liabilities, their bond indebtedness. So it's a very helpful tool. And what we're also doing at this point is trying to get people to help us if they have any interest in their city, to go online. I'll show you how to do that real fast. Marty's already left, okay, good. But I'll show you how real quickly you can get online and just fill out information on politician profiles, the politicians in your city. That could be city manager, elected officials, and then our goal here is to have that work follow these public officials, these future candidates for higher office, for as long as they may decide to serve. It's not hugely surprising to you guys, but people try to ignore in their current campaigns votes that they took on taxes or bonds in their previous lives. And they try to say, I'm a small government conservative Republican or whatever. I've always, I've never been afraid to stand up to the unions. Then you go back to something like this tool and you can find out how people really actually voted. So one of the things I was going to do here real quickly is just walk you through what we've got set up. To do that, I'm going to turn this around. You'll pardon me if I have my back to you here for just a moment. So I think what I'm going to try to do here real quickly is, one of the things that we're asking people to remember is that we're a 501c3, we're a nonprofit, and so for that reason, we're not like pro-Republican or anti-Democrat or anti-Republican. We are for smaller government, we are for fiscal accountability, and that's a really important designation for us. So we're opening up our website to participants like you guys, and in doing so, we're asking you, we'll be moderating all these conversations that are going on at the city level. But we're asking people who want to participate, just bear that in mind. We're not here to say, yay, for Republicans or all Democrats are bad, or even all unions are bad. One of the key points that I have discovered is union leaders tend to be operating on one issue and one issue only. I've got to get higher pay and benefits for my members. The members, 95% of the union, aren't really paying attention to what the implications are of that strategy. They're not looking at what this might mean for their community. And what I've told many union members that I've met, and a few of them actually know this, is you're not going to have a pension. The way this thing is working right now, this pension that you are depending on in your retirement is not going to be here. And if you believe it, you're nuts. Here's why. And it's because they're saying, well, we're gonna get if you wanna see anybody who's really bullish on the market, at the same, when they get done occupying Wall Street, they come back over to their union negotiations at City Hall and they say, you can go ahead and give us an increase because Wall Street's gonna increase at 5%, 10%, 15%, even, I've heard numbers like 19% on Wall Street. The market's headed for 50,000, the guy told me about a year ago. It's headed for 50,000 right now. They can give us an increase and the market will pay for it all. That guy was at an Occupy Wall Street movement not 1 week before, saying Wall Street and the banks are the problem. He was doing the Bernie Sanders thing. Wall Street is the problem, the banks are the problem. And then when he goes back to negotiate increases for his members, he's saying, don't worry about it, just invest all your pension money in Wall Street, and Wall Street will return 5, 10, 15, 20%, right? So we're nonpartisan in terms of Republicans and Democrats. We are small government, and our platform is not explicitly to endorse specific candidates or measures. Seems logical, I think. I'm going to skip most of this tutorial, Chris, if that's okay, and I'm going to go straight to the site. So this is our homepage, California Policy Center, right? And if you scroll down, let's see if this scrolls away my desk. Sorry, guys. New computer, I'm using Chris's. So you go down here to, you can see civic profiles, employee salaries, employee pensions. These two things right here, these are just generated. We have an algorithm set up that's just scraping data off local financials at the city and county level. If you click over here on civic profiles, what I wanted to show you all, you can type in a city here. I'm going to show you Stanton because that was the one I was just working on. I would go to Brea, but I don't think we filled out any information for it, and that's where you guys would come in. So you go to Stanton, here's the city council right here, City of Stanton, overview, elected officials. And here is Mr. Shaver right here. You see this guy right here? His name is David Shaver. He's the Republican I was mentioning to you, who's been on the city council for 28 years now. And in those 28 years, the city has most recently, in 5 years, suffered 2 near bankruptcies. They're building a $24 million Central Park. He's helped push a tax increase. They now have a tax repeal on the ballot coming up in November. He was the one council member who voted not to put even though the repeal supporters got enough signatures, he did not want the repeal on the ballot, so he voted against it and said he would rather fight it in court. This would just decimate his city. So, wanting to make sure that the public knew this, we have, if you click on his name, it tells you, here he is, and gives you a few of the key votes that he's made. My favorite is this most recent one here. It says issuance of tax allocation bonds. This is from 2011. So the way that I found this information here was I knew that there'd been an attempt to issue bond, a successful issuance of bonds back in 2011. So I went and I looked at the register to find out, like, what day was that passed? I found the date. Then I went to the city. I went to the city's own website, found the minutes for the appropriate year, pulled those minutes out, and I linked them here. So I know that it was item 5C, I wrote that there. And then I have the issuance of tax allocation bonds right here, it's linked. So you can see a little hand just popped up, so that's linked to the city minutes. And then I actually just described very briefly here. What I described was, if they had put these bonds to a citywide vote, it was likely that they would be voted down, right? Because they were asking the public to actually issue bonds for this park in the amount of about $30 million. At a time when, this is 2011, so remember we're just about, what is that, maybe 2 years past the housing collapse of 2009, 2008. So we're 2 or 3 years out. Market is still really shaky. People are talking about a second double dip in the economy at this point in the recession. So these guys meet. Oh, and Governor Brown has just done I would argue one of the few great things he's done. He shut down the redevelopment system. I don't know how you guys feel about redevelopment. It was being used in Stanton and most other cities in California. It was a complete game of musical chairs. It was like the movie The Big Short. If you've seen that movie, if you haven't, please go see it as soon as you can. Brilliant description of a complicated financial crisis behind the housing disaster. So they were using redevelopment money in Stanton to pay for city services. They were not using it to do what it was supposed to do, which was improve the condition of blighted communities, right? So they were just taking money out of the tax increment from the redevelopment. We can all talk about this another time, but I won't get too far into the weeds, but they were taking the redevelopment money and spending it on operations rather than capital investments. So these guys, knowing that the citywide vote on the bonds would go down in flames, used this wrinkle in the redevelopment law just before the redevelopment system was completely shut down to issue these bonds out of the redevelopment side. And they did it on a vote of the 3 council members who are still on the city council. And they issued it at 9.45% interest rate, 9.45 interest. You can imagine. This is not quite a credit card, but it's getting really close to that. So that's where you get this obligation of about $1.5 to $2 million per year in interest payments for those bonds. And they never talk about this. They do not talk about the indebtedness of the city, even with regard to the pensions or the health care, but certainly not with regard to the bonds. So you can go into this system, you have to sign up, and I can show you guys how to sign up if anybody's interested. I don't want to bore everybody with how to sign up on a website, but afterward, if people want to talk to me about this, Chris, if that's okay, we'll talk about that. But our goal here is to make sure that this guy in particular, but others on that city council, are all held responsible for the votes they've made in that city to raise taxes. We've got the tax increase up here too.
Were those funds held back, or ultimately, did they get access, or were they held by the state?
No, they got access because they were able to, well, it's now unclear, there appears to be some local enthusiasm for challenging the legality of this move. They claimed that this was totally in keeping. One of the things they love to say now is, well, this was a capital project. We're building a central park. They just didn't tell people the park was, they told people the park was going to cost $6 million, not 24 to 42 if you carry out all the millions of dollars of interest payments. So yes, they got the money out just before. That's why they were hurrying so quickly, because in January of the following year, this is 2011, in January of 2012, I think it was January, it might have been February, there's a cutoff of redevelopment
That
funds.
happened here.
It did, same thing, huh? All right. It happened up and down the state. If you go listen to the city officials in Stanton talk about it, perhaps it's the same here. They talk about Jerry Brown as this bad liberal guy who stole all this money and took it to Sacramento. What he in fact did was shut down a game of financial musical chairs. It was a racket, a total racket.
There were great things.
Pardon?
There were great things involved in it,
There
and
could
there
be.
were thief things
Yes.
involved. So it's both.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The city of Santa Ana was 100% redevelopment zone. The city of Stanton was 98%. At some point, there's a problem with your entire city being blighted.
Yeah, we
And-
had 4 zones.
Pardon?
We had 4 redevelopment areas.
And you guys may have done a great job. I honestly haven't studied it.
We're the reason it was great, and we're the reason it was closed. And I put our city manager and the governor together to fight for it at the end on Sundays, face to face, on the phone, whatever, because I could. And
Wow.
we failed because Jerry was right. We were guilty. We started off right, and then we became addicted to a drug, and it turned into exactly what you just described
Yeah.
here.
And what was interesting was that it put other agencies in real financial peril. The Savannah School District down in Stanton is one of the poorest in Orange County. Some of you guys may know Rebecca Friedrichs. She's a teacher who's involved in the Friedrichs versus California Teachers
Yeah.
Association Supreme Court case. It was
Just
that's the one, yeah. If you're not familiar with Friedrichs versus CTA, go look it up on the internet. It's an amazing story of an Orange County teacher who took on the CTA and said, I'm not going to let you guys speak for me anymore. She went to the Supreme Court. It looked like she was going to win 5-4, and then Antonin Scalia had a heart attack and dropped dead in, where was he, New Mexico, Texas?
Texas.
Texas, thank you. And the case just deadlocked 4-4. She has another hearing coming up, but my point is only that she teaches in one of the lousiest districts in the county. And I was talking to her about it this week. We were at a conference together, and she was saying that the Savannah School District was frozen out because of redevelopment there, like 25 years of redevelopment fiascos. Savannah was underfunded radically because of the redevelopment scandal going on in Stanton. So you've got lousy educational outcomes, you've got people paying operating expenses, you've got businesses being shut down, homes being bulldozed, ironically. It was a crazy system. And what you get in return is a $24 million park, plus another 24 or so million in obligations. So this system, as I say, I don't want to bore anybody with a lesson in how to sign up on this site and how you can participate, but we really would like people to participate in Brea, elsewhere, to just help us document what's going on in your city and provide something like a Wikipedia, basically. Now, you guys may already have something. That's part of what I wanted to come here and find out was, are you guys getting, someone told me, Chris just told me before, that you actually have a blog here, which I have not I'm embarrassed to say, ever paid attention to, so I would
Well,
like
you're amongst the majority.
You guys can sign up for each other's.
to.
Yeah.
I want to sign up for his, he doesn't have to sign up for mine.
I'll give you a card, I'll be
Would
happy
you?
to
Thank
talk
you.
to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's got a good blog.
That's what we really need. Like, boy, I just think we really, you know, in the apps of the, I grew up in the news industry, and I was really lucky to participate when it was fantastic, and I was unfortunate to participate when, you know, it died, basically, hit by the internet on one side, recession on the other, and just a general decline in readership and loss of advertising. We need active, engaged people who really care about their communities to write about this stuff. Because as great as it is to have an Orange County Register, you guys now know the Register was just sold. It was sold to a company called Digital First. They are infamous for coming in and kind of homogenizing content across multiple platforms. That's the business euphemism. What it really means is we try to reduce local expense as much as possible and centralize content production. What that may mean ultimately is anybody's guess, but it's likely that what will happen is the Register will become less and less about Orange County cities. There was a time when I was running the weekly, the LA Times had, I want to say 200 or 250 reporters down here. The Register had somewhere in the neighborhood of 400. We were in a newspaper war. We were all fighting to get stories first. They were increasing their circulation. They were in Times and Register were in a circulation war. The weekly, when I was running it, we had.
Pre-Twitter, right?
Pardon?
Pre-Twitter.
Yeah, I'm talking about like 1990.
This is when we actually had a 24-hour news cycle.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. This is 1995 to about 2002 or 3 perhaps. And maybe even 2005, 2006, yeah. And I think at that point the weekly had about 80,000 circulations. Now got somewhere in the neighborhood about 25, I think. Register has just gotten sold. Of course, it was at one point valued at something like $3 billion, billion with a B. It was sold for, does anybody remember, 25 million, I think?
49 minus the land they sold for 34, so
Yeah.
15 million.
Yeah, it was not a lot of money.
They flipped off the land,
Yes, they did.
so, yeah.
Yeah. So my point is only that we're going to get less and less local coverage, and that makes a tool like this, it makes a blog like yours absolutely essential. And it's really difficult for people like us. We're all geeks here, and we understand this kind of stuff. And our challenge, frankly, for you and for me as communicators is to really talk to people with some kind of human interest. It is hard to compete with the likes of the Kardashians or Donald Trump or Prince died today, if you're into that sort of thing. It's like, these are really...
It's the first time I've heard it.
Is that right? Not the Prince.
Tell him how.
Pardon?
Tell him how he died.
I don't know
That's what he
yet.
wants to know.
Everybody wants to know.
Overdose.
I think we know.
You think so? Not the flu?
TMZ doesn't know, nobody knows.
The TMZ said it's an overdose.
Yeah.
They had to give him the shot of life when that plane landed, and he was doing it, and he was.
That seems really likely because the guy is my age. In fairness, he was 7 months older than I am. That would make the difference, am I right? Yeah.
Yep.
I got 7 more months to live well. So all I'm saying is that it's really difficult for us to get people's attention talking about pensions. I was talking to a guy at Reason Magazine the other day, and we were commiserating over the fact that the word pensions in a headline is a sure way to kill off readership.
What demographic are you anticipating is going to be most involved with your organization and participating?
Well, this is one part of what we do. And I anticipate that the people who will be most interested in this are people who are really it's a limited audience, but it's the people who are in this room. We set up, as I said, we set up Transparent California, which is a separate site I can show you, and you can go in there and look up public employee pay. And our joke is that the people who spend the most time on our site, we don't know for sure because we're not able to get to generate the right data on our readers. We bet, however, that it's mostly public employees who are at work trying to figure out how they're going to get their next pay increase and who's making more than them and how much that guy over there makes and that slacker over there and how much am I making relative to somebody over here. Maybe I want to move from Costa Mesa to Fresno and I want to find out. So we think that some people will be looking at Transparent California who are just interested in salaries. But for this is probably really an activist's tool. I think. This is where people are going to go to find out how people really voted on key issues. And when I say key, it's not social issues, we're looking strictly at financial issues. So it's bonds, taxes.
Don't you think that more people are concerned about what do they know about me as opposed to how do I find out about them?
Say more about that, because I think you're going to say the same thing that I would answer anyway, but please tell me.
You know, I'm trying to picture anybody under 35, except for Chris, spending much time here at all. TLTR comes to mind immediately. That's the mantra of people sub 35. Too long to read. There's not an interest in spending the time.
Or how does it affect me?
Yeah.
Yeah,
the person.
and they don't have the tools to come to find out that conclusion, how it affects them. They don't know how to get there. You know, they have a very vertical set of skills that so far hasn't proven to be very marketable. But you're not going to get them there. However, you probably, amongst those who are coming to the site, interested in finding out what's going on in their city or in their neighborhoods, are likely to be high probability voters. You know, they're people who have some sense of what it does mean for them. Can you get them motivated? I don't know. I put something up on my blog, I will get, in the first 48 hours, phone calls and emails, 60 to 100. People responding, making comment, you know, who are you kidding, where'd you find that out, you know, you name it.
Yeah.
But I'll be lucky to get 2 or 3 comments every other blog because people do not want to be, they don't want that exposure.
Yeah.
I think probably in this room, probably 75% of the people here have read it at least once. And not one of them, even if the article pissed them off, occurred to them to wade in for or against.
Yeah,
They don't want that
to your
exposure.
face. They'll tell you personally though.
They do that, yes sir, they do.
Or I do.
Yes, you do.
Well, and I think as brilliant and useful as that is, most people, just like going to the doctor or calling whomever, they want to know what's the solution. Okay,
Yeah.
where's the accountability and solution
Right.
with this? Show me the path.
Fair enough. And so that's why if we, see if I, gosh, I really wish I do have the glasses. What am I saying? Wow, much better. I think this is right. Yes, great. Okay. So if we go back to California Policy Center, we have several projects, and we have a number of different ways of getting this information out there. But we do analysis of pensions. You can see this is one where we did all the California counties. We looked at their pension liabilities, their unfunded liabilities, CalPERS, ticking time bomb. This is not the solutions part of it. I hear you. And here's some of my stuff on Stanton. You can
But that's
see,
good. You're identifying the problem. You have
Yes.
to do that first. That's great.
Totally hear that, yeah. So we're working on the problem. We've just launched something in direct response to what you're saying. Both you guys are saying something really similar. How do you get a critical mass interested, I think?
Yeah.
How do you draw people in? I, for a very brief time, when I was so excited about Costa Mesa, started up my own blog to report on it. And I got, for every piece I published, I got somewhere between 300 and 400 hits, 300 and 400. I got 6 to 10 comments. And what I found out was that the people who were most responsive were the people who were most upset with me. They tended to be people who really, you know, whose ox was gored, if you will. I really hate that phrase.
Yeah.
You know what I mean. People who felt like I really hurt them. It was, I'll give you the name later and you can go look it up. It was called the Republic of Costa Mesa. And I was writing high-level analysis and with great humor because it was free and nobody was paying me to do it, so I had a great time. But the fact was I was trying to make it as pop cultural as I could, and I still got, as I say, you know, a few hundred hits.
Yeah, that's well beyond my skill. Pop culture? Sorry.
Well, I mean, in the sense, well, I'll ask you to read it, and then you can
Okay,
decide. I had people
okay.
who told me, my God, can you write something under 5,000 words? Not really, not unless you pay me, right? If you pay me, I can write short and I can write crisp. But if this is just for me and I'm entertaining myself, I'm gonna have a great time. And I'm gonna reference novels and films and psychologists and history because it's for me. So the question is, how do we get people in? And one of the other answer is that we can get, one answer to your question, by the way, I think is, and we may agree on this, we don't need to get everybody. We need to get a few opinion leaders. We need to get, you said, we need to get the people who are most likely to vote. And there are other people out there who say, "My gosh, we've got to encourage people to vote." No, we don't. We really don't. I don't want morons to go and vote on any side.
And when you live when you live in a country where the majority rules, all you gotta do is get a majority. If that's 3 out of 5 votes,
Yes, sir. Well said. Yeah.
And if
So-
you don't think there's morons, just watch Water's World.
Watch what?
Water's World.
What's
On
that?
Fox.
Pardon?
The guy goes around.
O'Reilly's program.
Who was the
on
first
Fox.
president, blah, blah, blah.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
Missed
He
it.
interviews people.
it's every week.
Let me tell you. They
it's
don't
better than
have
Jay
that.
Leno's street interview.
It's like that, like that.
Okay. I haven't watched enough television, obviously. That's where my pop culture is lagging. But the other thing is that we do have to provide a solution, I think. And so one of the things that we've just started is we're calling it Prosperity Digest, and it's just sort of an internal framework for us. And that's really talking about, and I'm just going to say it like it is here, and I apologize if I offend anybody, but I'm not a conservative. I am a very free market guy. In my own life, I'm a Catholic with a mortgage, 4 children, and a almost lifelong wife. She'll tell you that it's been longer than life. I'm very conservative in my own life, but I don't believe I have any right to tell other people really how to live as long as I'm not required to subsidize it. And it doesn't really cost me anything, right? They can offend me. It's okay. It's totally fine. And by the same corollary, the commutative property here, I'm allowed to offend them. It's okay. People can be offended. We're all adults. It's okay to. I'm not trying to be offensive, but people may be offended, and they may not be trying to offend me, but sometimes they do.
So
And
why are
that's
you
okay.
here?
To be offensive, you mean?
Oh, no, I'm just saying, if you, with that comfortable little scenario, what the hell would ever make you want to leave that cocoon?
Oh, because I don't live in a cocoon. Because
Okay.
my family got here, part of my family got here in the 1770s. Part of my family got here within the last 10 years. My children, I have 4 children. Those children are going to grow up in a state that is almost certain to be broke. Almost certain. Absolutely almost certain to be broke. I was telling somebody the other day who said, California is in such terrible financial shape. It is going to melt down. Why would you even fight? They were asking me roughly the same question you were, and I thought, I told them, I said, this is a great fight. The fact that we are almost certain not to succeed, I love this. This is fantastic.
And you say that because of defined benefit plans.
Yes.
That's the,
Largely.
Yeah.
But not only. I say it because of the power of the public employee unions, not just the financial problem, but the fact that they have long coattails, the public employee unions. So they are willing to support almost any harebrained scheme as long, any candidate at all. And in Costa Mesa, they've got a conservative Republican. In Stanton, they have a conservative Republican. And so those 2 people, just to take 2 examples with which I'm really familiar, can do anything they want. The person in Costa Mesa, her chief public policy contribution is to have the words "In God We Trust" chiseled into the walls of City Hall. That's it. Otherwise, she signed off on increasing pay and benefits for public employees. That's what she's done. And she gets into office year after year after year. So I talk to my liberal friends in Costa Mesa and I say, you're electing a person whose views are absolutely contrary to your own year after year after year because she's backed by the public employee unions. That's who's running your city, the public employee unions. On the left, which is much more of a problem, and I apologize for being this candid, we get a Sacramento Assembly and Senate and a governor, an executive, who are absolutely willing to continue to bankroll almost every crazy project without regard to righting the financial ship, that is turning it right side up. We have the Sacramento Delta project. We have a high-speed rail train from nowhere to somewhere else.
that's the kiss of death.
Yeah, am I right? Yeah. There is no question that we have a drought, but the crisis of that drought is man-made. It is a policy issue. It's because we don't have a sense of prosperity. The state in general has lost faith that there are innovations, there are solutions out there, that human ingenuity is absolutely the most remarkable resource California has. And what we've come to believe in this sort of doom and gloom narrative of the far left. Well, how does a gospel of doom, collapse, and devolution, how does that succeed in a state like California? Because those are the people who are willing to sign off on union pay and benefits no matter what it means financially. So what we're dealing with at this organization is not just the financial costs, that's not the only problem California has. It has a problem with a narrative that is espoused by a small group of very hardcore, I would argue, people who really are into the apocalypse. They believe the only way to save California is to shut the door, don't let it grow, don't build any more houses, don't do any more innovation, lock in what we've got right now. I've got mine, nobody else gets to come. And the result is that the state is slowly locking up. Regulations don't allow businesses to grow, they don't allow experimentation. We can't build infrastructure. The last guy who really built infrastructure in this state, ironically, was the Democrat, Pat Brown, Jerry Brown's dad. And those were these massive state-funded projects. But there's very little appetite in the state right now, certainly not in the capital, and I know you guys know this, but there's no appetite in the capital for innovation. I heard today that the latest, greatest innovation was that we're going to provide health care at a cost of $40 to $60 million per year, that's the government's estimate, for children of undocumented
Million or
immigrants.
billion?
Billion, I'm sorry. Thank you. No, it was million per year. I'm
40
sorry.
million?
40 million per year. Yeah, it sounds like it's not a bad deal, right? What's that old saying? A million here, a million there, and soon you're talking about
For
real
here.
money? Yeah, well, it doesn't sound like the real number to me. 40 to 60 million.
Impossible.
Especially in a state like California. And again, I'm raised Catholic. I was raised on the social gospel. I'm supposed to take care of my brother, but not through the confiscated wealth of other people. That's not an act of charity. That's an act of theft. So while the state is
What is your opinion on not having to prove citizenship to go to a public school for a free education?
I think it's highly problematic. I really do.
When-
It's just my opinion, and it has nothing to do with what our organization does. This is just my personal opinion.
Our school district in 2021 will pay 19 cents of every dollar to CalSTR's pension bill.
Yeah,
So we have 81 cents left for all the kids.
right. In Costa Mesa, that's 24 cents out of every dollar. Yeah,
It's impossible.
it is, and that number is growing.
That's only
So-
till then, right?
So what I'm saying is that part of what I think we have to do on our side, people who believe in, I would argue, to some extent, we have to be the optimists. There are days when this thing looks absolutely like Greece melting down. I mean, Greece, the country, not the hit movie with John Travolta.
I hear you.
Yeah. It really looks kind of dark, I think. And
You didn't mention the minimum wage.
which is kind of a joke in a number of ways, right? It's a joke because if you really do the inflation forward, by the time, when did they say California's the first state to get $15 minimum wage? When? I think it's in 2022, is that right?
Yes.
2023?
That's not that far.
By then, what that really will buy, apparently according to inflation models that I was looking at, is about either 12, depending on which one I was looking at, $12.57, which is still, it's money, or $13. So on the left, it's like everybody's going, yay, we're gonna get $15. No, you're not. There's gonna be like an ATM machine there for you to order. And your food will maybe there'll be a guy in the back preparing it, I guess, for a while. But yeah, that's where it's going. You are absolutely 100% right. The unintended consequences of what the pro-government side of the assembly, which is almost the entire assembly and almost the entire Senate, what their goal, of course, is, and it's, I get where they're coming from. The problem of poverty is real. The problem of poor education is real, and their solution is always something that will create greater poverty and worse education. I was just up in LA talking to people who are running charter schools. The charter schools are outperforming the LA's traditional public schools. Charter schools are also public schools, but charters are outperforming on test scores and financially the traditional educational system. What does the United Teachers of LA say? This is a billionaire's takeover of our education system. They are trying to lock up our children for the next 100 years. Not, oh my gosh, look what we can learn from these people. These are the densest people in the classroom, and they're the teachers. So virtually everything, I know I'm speaking to the choir here on this, but virtually every proposal from that side of the political spectrum has the unintended consequence, I'm afraid, financially, of putting California farther behind the eight
The
ball.
reason is that the group you're talking about with the power, cumulatively, has never paid $1 of capital gains tax, created a job, created
Sure.
enterprise. What you're saying, we've lost.
Yes.
they don't understand, our president doesn't.
Correct.
So you can't have something run by people that they don't know what that is.
They've never done it. You're absolutely right. Yeah, for those of us who've run a business or actually had to, take care of a home or a
Took a
mortgage or
risk.
whatever, we get it, yeah. And not only us, fortunately, there'd be an even bigger problem, I'm convinced. But I really do think that this is an issue on which many people, and that's why I was saying earlier that I think that we can speak to union members without vilifying them. Most of the teachers I meet, frankly, when I tell them what's going on with their union, are shocked. They don't know. And when you ask them, so what are you going to do? They say, well, I couldn't possibly do anything because the union folks will just, they'll beat the trash out of me. This will be really, they are physically scared. When you talk to the firefighters and the cops, by contrast, they all get it. They all know what the scam is. I was with some of them in Costa Mesa, and they went out on a run. I got to go with them as a reporter. And they load up the big rig, right, that has, I think, 6 guys on it, I want to say. It's 5 or 6 guys. There was a lot of people. 2 guys and the paramedics. So they run, I think by the time we were out there, they said it was 8 people. So it was 6 and 2, I think. So we get out there, and then there's me, looking like Michael Dukakis. They made me put a little helmet on. It's kind of embarrassing. But so we get out there, and I'm expecting flames, a conflagration from some house or something. And I can't hear what the guy is telling me, even over the little walkie-talkie thing they've got inside there. But we get over there. There's no fire at all. There's nobody outside to wave us in. They know where it is. We roll up. We go inside. It was an older woman who had gotten dizzy and got up and called 911. And so for this, they rolled everybody out. They took her blood pressure. She said she was probably just a little tired and she didn't want to go to the hospital. That took us an hour, and it was 8 guys. And I'm glad that we were able to comfort this poor woman in the afternoon. That was fantastic. But this is what they say is necessary for every single call they make. And so you start to look at the 8 guys who were on that thing, making now we know about $236,000 with benefits per year. Somebody's better at math than I am, but I think that's
$1,000 a day for each day they work.
Oh, you're doing the day thing. I was saying per year, we've got 8 times about $250,000 is $2 million, is that right, per year? In paying benefits to do that, right? So when I suggested to them that maybe it would be wiser just to have medical guys, like I've got a son in the Army, they got medics. How old is the medic? 22 years old.
It's more than 2 million because they don't work 30 days a month each. There's going to be 24 or 30.
Oh, I was just talking about just those 8 guys. Just those guys.
But it rotates, so
Of course they do. I was talking about just those 8
10
guys
million
on
for that one
truck.
truck to be on call.
Yes, just that one. No, you're absolutely right, because they only work 2 to 3 days, depending on what, yeah. Yes, ma'am.
How many in this room is called the Brea paramedics? I live in a townhome, and those guys came in, and not only did they have the truck that the paramedics was on, they sent the big ladder truck into
Yeah.
my little development.
Yes.
And those guys come in and, they got all this equipment and things on in my tiny, and they say, are you all right? How many fingers do I, and all this,
Right.
well, the blood's coming out of the side of my head. And I was totally overwhelmed. And then they called the ambulance because I did pounce my head, and that charged my insurance $1,000.
Yes.
They did?
Yes,
I didn't
Yeah.
know they do that.
Yeah, the
yes.
The
ambulance is
private
separate.
ambulance firm does, yeah.
Oh, the
that's-
private firm, that's what they,
Private.
that's right, they're
Yeah, it's
$1,000 to
exactly the
go
same
up.
$1,000, and my insurance covered it all but $100. I thank goodness I've got good insurance. But I'm interested in what's gonna happen to us old people.
Yeah.
Soylent Green.
Well,
Sorry.
a friend of mine just a month ago tried to call 911 and didn't even get through until the 3rd time. She had a burglar in her house while she was
Oh, my
home.
Lord,
Why didn't
that's
it go
terrifying.
through? It was busy?
Yeah, it was busy.
I didn't know that.
The 3rd time she finally got through.
So this experience,
What city
this
is it?
conversation is a good one, because
That happened right here.
what the sheriffs, what the local
Right here.
police, what the firefighters will tell you is there is no alternative. And that experience that your friend had with somebody in the house and not being able to get through, that's because of budget cuts. It's because of small-minded people who don't want to pay these people what they need, and the result is terrible. It's, women raped in their homes by burglars. It's people falling down and banging their heads and bleeding to death because there's nobody there to answer the call. And what I told the guys in Costa Mesa was, again, we can send kids who are between 18 and 25 to a foreign country with lethal power and life-saving technology, and we can train them in a few weeks, deploy them for 2 years to 3 years to 4 years, depending. And then we can basically kind of kick them out, right? Like, I don't know how many of you guys know anybody who works in the homeless services community. It's terrifying. These are people who are like my kids' age, who have gone over there, come back, and my point is only to say, we don't take care of those people very well. The guys who go risk their lives over there, that's really risking your life. Firefighting is occasionally dangerous, but it doesn't even rank in the top 20 of most dangerous occupations in America. Apparently meat cutting, very, very dangerous. Pardon? Roofing, yeah. A lot of broken necks.
I think the ambulance rates are similar to why trash is expensive. I think there's some
Monopoly.
kickback. No, I think the cities, like our city, charges $750,000 to Republic to be the trash hauler, so that they can then charge us whatever they say is fair. And I think
Right.
the ambulance thing is who gets the call.
Sure,
Obviously, they're paying supervisors and people,
sure.
and money's going somewhere for the right to charge $1,000
Yeah.
for a 10-mile drive.
And I'm not suggesting, please, that being a policeman isn't a dangerous or difficult job. It's a very difficult job. And firefighting can be a very difficult and dangerous job. I am just saying that there are more efficient ways of doing it. We know this for a fact. But we have a built-in interest group that has such powerful politics, such powerful political connections.
What if you put police and fire in a hold pile and said, you know what, I'm not gonna make for the defined benefits that the blood issue, but you went to the non-life risking, the executives, the teachers, the Edison, that have defined benefit plans. Do you see a difference with the categories of these defined benefits?
Sure, it is. There is a difference, but consider that. I think what was the median income for a teacher is about a third of what it is for a firefighter. And though there are more teachers than firefighters, the fact is that the average firefighter lives to be 84, I think, and the average male, so let's take a male teacher, is 78, I want to say. The last numbers I looked at for actuarial tables.
Really?
Yeah. Firefighters live longer than the median male. And that could be for a whole bunch of reasons. Maybe they really are fitter than the rest of us. They get to lift weights a lot, lift hoses, pose for calendars.
But there's a lot more teachers than firemen, right?
Pardon?
There's a lot more teachers than firemen.
There are, yes.
So if
There's-
you-
Yeah, so you would expect that even at a 3-to-1 ratio of salaries, that 300,000, I don't know how many firefighters are, I gotta check, 300,000 teachers, I think, in California.
Our budget is, in round numbers, 50 million a year for the city, and our fire and police is approximately 65% of that.
Yeah, it's a big
So
number.
basically, we're in business, the majority is for those two
Yeah.
things.
And in a way, their argument is, doesn't that make sense? These are the life-saving, these are the most imperative, these are the imperative social services, right? To guarantee our safety, public safety. But the question for me has become, is there not a better way to organize this? What would happen? I told the guys in Costa Mesa, in fact, what we did was we said at age 18, we're gonna take the fittest people we can find, we're gonna train them for 6 weeks or 12 weeks, whatever it requires. We're gonna put them under the command of people who've been there for 6 years, 10 years, 12 years, much more of a pyramid, right? Very much like the military, in fact. We're gonna put them under the command of people who have more experience, and then we're gonna have them go out and fight fires, and we're gonna have a separate medical team, because 80% of the calls in most cities and counties in California, 80% of them are medical, and they're doing they're doing the sort of thing that you described, where these guys in, what do they call them, their turnout clothes,
Yeah.
come bustling into a condo in, Brea or Irvine, and
They're
they
moving the
squeeze.
furniture out of the way and I'm
Yeah,
thinking,
push the furniture
what
aside.
are you doing?
Yeah, well, we're here to move, apparently.
If they had defined contribution plans,
Yes.
the salary of 230 that you were talking about wouldn't cause heartburn. There'd be extra money. It's the defined benefit that's truly the boogeyman in that
Yes.
equation.
In part because we don't know what that's gonna cost us, do we? The defined benefit.
It
We
is absolutely a Ponzi. A defined benefit plan is an unknown quantity.
It is.
That I hope I take in enough later or make enough to pay you, which anybody goes to jail for.
Right, unless you're in government, in which case we call it social security.
Have you ever explored, oh, sorry.
Sorry, 1 second.
He's talking about heartburn. I got a massive heartburn about 3 weeks ago. When I was young, in my 60s, I took out a long-term care policy. And it held real good, the thing, for 9 or 10 years. And then it's starting to go like this because the insurance companies did not realize what it was going to cost, like $4,000 or $5,000 a month for, or 10 on some occasions. And I got my bill for this year's long-term care, and it went up $1,050
Per year?
per year. On top of the 4,000 and something it already had gone up to. Now then it's up to 5,000.
Yeah,
You're betting that we're gonna die sooner than we are.
they're hoping.
That's an actuary issue.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
I was digging into the California pension system and its history, which I think is really fascinating because when it was started in the 1930s, life expectancy for a Californian was 62. Retirement was what age? 62. We were hoping that the day we shook your hand and slapped you on the keister on your way out the door, you're going to walk out to your car and drop dead of a heart attack in the parking lot.
That's Social Security, that's how it was.
That was how it was supposed to be. And then we started living longer. And as we're living longer, you would think that we would start to plan for like how we're going to pay this off. But in fact, the benefits go up. When they started, they were 2%. Times your average salary over 30 years at 62.
There's the difference between Social Security and the state of California is that the federal government can print money
Yes.
legally.
Yes.
So it doesn't matter how much they owe, they can print it. We can't. So
Right.
we will lose our buildings and our roads and our
Yes, we will.
parks to the unions.
That's right.
To the people.
So my point was that if you look at life expectancy, it's gone from 62 to
82.
roughly 79 or 82, depending on your gender and your race and a bunch of other things, but roughly around 80 years old, let's say. So it's gone up 18 years, which is almost a generation, right?
Yeah.
So you have people who, as firefighters, are going to. I have a friend who's a firefighter from a city that will not be named, not here. I'm 56, he's 56. He's been retired for 8 years. When he retired, he had a house in Irvine, a house in Maui, and a house in Vail. He now has also a house in Idaho and a house in St. George, Utah. 5 houses. I said, "Are you renting these out?" And he said, "Oh no, who wants to deal with renters?" He's also got timeshare, they call them timeshares, I guess, with a private jet, so that he and his firefighter buddies can go to these various places where they keep home. So in the winter, it's go skiing in Vail or go out to Maui. These are his places.
He was a chief or something?
Yes, that's as much as I can say. And that our kids played ice hockey together, and one of us is still working.
Nothing personal.
Yeah, no, I got it. So his argument is that this is just, he risked his life, he says.
Yeah.
And I know that his job was hard, I get it. I drive 55 every day. That's kind of hard, right?
Well, window washers risk their lives.
Window washing, butchering, coal mining, yeah, there are other jobs, right?
Firefighters risk their lives at the grocery store, as Debbie was saying.
I saw a lot of barbecuing going on.
Yeah.
Yes, there was a lot of fire. So I do not mean to besmirch them. I'm joking. I get it that these guys do valuable work. I am saying there's better ways to organize it. And I think the most important thing we could do, and I've already taken up way too much time, Chris, I just noticed, I'm so sorry. The most important thing we can do, though, is really sort of feel like those, who were they? I think it was the Celtic warriors who used to go into battle and say, what a glorious day to die. I really feel at some level like the odds are terribly against us. And they're against us because we have public employee unions who can confiscate cash directly from payroll with the help of the government. That's what we're looking at. We're looking at California Policy Center. We're looking at the power of public employee unions. And again, it is a problem of finance, but it's also a problem of politics and how they control our cities and counties and state.
So how do we overcome it?
Well, I think that you guys are doing the right thing. Part of it is to fight locally. Part of it is to support candidates. Chris works for one of them, but to support candidates who really understand this. Part of it is to undermine the narrative of the other side and to really, to contradict, but it's also, I think, just to speak out with optimism about what might be. There's a guy named, I think I even have his book right here. Very famous writer. Back in the 40s, he wrote this book. Henry Hazlitt. You guys heard of this guy?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Hotel room key, business cards, sorry about that. Henry Hazlitt, it's called Economics in One Lesson. And this group, Foundation for Economic Education, gives this book out. I really recommend this book. It is a joy to read. It's a blast. One of the things that Hazlitt says is that we are always competing against the concrete reality of what the state can produce with all this wealth. If the state confiscates money, it can go out and say, we built the dam, we built a road, we have a school and we have teachers in there who appear to be teaching, we have a fire station, right? They can point to these things. What we cannot really effectively point to is what's missing. What happens with all the wealth that is sucked out of the economy to go to the support of interest payments, unfunded pension liabilities, all this cash that goes to support for a firefighter with 5 houses around the country. Where does all that wealth come from? It comes from people in this room who might be producing jobs, who might be buying other things with the money that is being taken from them by the
It's
state.
leading to the homeless problem because they're taking too much of the pie for that select group. That's money
Yeah, that is one of
wouldn't
the
be
problems.
available as resources. They're taking it for themselves off the top.
Yes. Recommend this book. That's my last commercial message. Really liked it. Sorry, Chris, I took so much longer than I anticipated, and I didn't really even get to talk about how to log into our fabulous system.
Does your website, or do you know of another website that actually totals up all of the unfunded liability with all the various groups, like for, say for California, and then if you do it for the city, we could each add in our own city. But it's like I was reading about the increase in the Cal State University 10.5 salary increase.
Yes.
And how that's going to impact the California Employees Association unfunded liability.
Right.
And that alone, I think it said, I'm not sure of the number, but I think it was like 43 billion short right now. I mean, you add that to the government
Right.
employees to, I mean, is there somewhere where we could get a picture of exactly how much each Californian is currently stuck for?
That is a great thing for us to put in the front of our website, like one of those little counters that calculates the national debt, to do that for the state of California on pension liability. Can I just tell my boss that I
Yeah,
thought
see,
of
and
that?
then you add in the national stuff. I mean,
Right.
it's just insane.
The short answer is I know I have seen the number for California's total debt. And of course, as a state, we're not really technically allowed to run debt. So this is hidden in things like unfunded pension liabilities and bonds and that sort of
Right,
thing.
that's the Constitution, is it has to be a balanced budget, right?
Right.
So the Constitution and defined benefits are conflicting.
They're antithetical.
So theoretically,
We're
that's-
allowed, though, let me say this, we're allowed to issue bonds, we're allowed to issue debt. And what's the reason? The reason is that because we want to build a road now, it will provide value year after year after year,
And
ostensibly,
that's
right?
disclosed what the debt is.
Yes,
when
exactly.
taken out. But,
Yeah, you're right, the defined benefit doesn't allow you to know what that number is.
so, I argue by definition that
It is
defined benefits
unconstitutional.
are unconstitutional.
I do not believe, as far as I know, that anybody has ever challenged that law in quite that way.
Sounds like
And
fun.
even at
Love
the-
your ingenuity.
Even in the local level, we have a balanced budget ordinance law in Brea.
Right.
I argue, I ran this by the guy, what's his name?
Edward?
Your lawyer, Edward Tischler, who put me with the person from Howard Jarvis, who said the state has already said they will not touch the liabilities from defined benefit. I said, this argument, I want to fund this lawsuit, I'm willing to do this, doesn't touch the old problem, but if you stop it going forward
Right.
and say, okay, that's unconstitutional, right?
Sure.
We could save our state from that, because that is the cliff that we will go off of if this continues exponential in the next 10 years.
Yeah.
And I think that it has to be unconstitutional by having that mandate, that it's a balanced budget. It's not balanced the second you do that.
I think you're right. I'm not a lawyer, but
Finally.
it just
I
seems,
agree. Logically, it sounds right.
Well,
finally someone agrees with you. And I think it's a really interesting idea.
Tischler said the same thing. He said, you know what? That
I'm
makes
sorry, who is
sense.
this?
Tessier.
Tessier, the lawyer from San Diego that sued Brea and won for, what kind of a lawyer is he? He's his lawyer. He's an old guy that's genius, that takes on community cities.
Yeah.
And his name is Tessier?
Edward, yes.
Like Tessier?
Teyssier. He beat San Diego as well.
I
I'm sorry,
want
what was
this,
the last thing you said?
Teys.
no, who did he beat?
San Diego.
Oh.
On their.
Was he working with that guy? What's his name? Carl DeMaio? Carl DeMaio?
Carl DeMaio is the mayor down in San Diego.
He was, right?
It had to do with the business processing fee. In other words.
Okay, I'll go look that up.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think it's
I like
fascinating.
solutions, and that's why I was like, but I think even if it lost, it could win, because it is exactly, it would explain simply that defined benefit is Ponzi. And you could show every person in prison that's alive and the ones that have died in prison for doing the exact same thing. Give me your money, I'll give you this back, and I hope I take in more later.
Yeah,
That's exactly what they're running.
it really is. I really like your thinking, thank you.
Well, you'll email
I wrote
me.
this down as my idea.
Please.
And at the end of this meeting, I said, somebody ought to sue the city, the county, and the state because the defined benefit constitutes undefinable debt. And we can't
I'll see if we can
constitutionally
schedule
do
it.
Pardon? You guys all heard me come up with this idea right here while I was standing in front of you.
Well, that's the thing, they're getting council and legislation to approve these things, but they're not disclosing the debt. If that was listed, no elected official could vote yes for that, they would
It'd be
run.
shocking. Sir?
If you're successful in exposing the general public or sharing with them the magnitude of the iceberg under the water, what is that going to do to the public's psyche? They're going to see a line at the end of the runway that says, if you haven't taken off by here, you're not getting this thing off the ground. And all of a sudden, they're going to see the magnitude of that iceberg, and they're going to go catatonic.
Not if you give them a solution.
Yeah, there are.
Well, that's just it. Nobody's working towards the development of a solution.
Let me get
People
back
do
to
a
the
great
solution.
job bitching, but they don't do a great job solving.
Well, let me get back to you on solutions. I like some of the things we've heard tonight. Part of me is just what's the German word? Schadenfreude. I'm taking joy in other people's misfortune.
Mm-hmm.
I've been living with this, and you guys have too, for years, right? Like for me, it's only been 15 years that I've been thinking about this problem, and it's looming larger, and it seriously worries me. A little bit of it feels like you did just a moment ago, like finally, at last, I'm not crazy. Somebody else understands, right?
Well, they're taking away.
But I take your point. Solution.
What we're paying with is 28 student classes are 42 students. At 48, at 52, at 56, when does it become too much? If the street sweeper never comes again, if the police take 20 minutes to get to your house. On our nextdoor.com, the big complaint this week is petty crime is going way up. All the little things, they blame Prop 47.
Yeah.
But the truth is, our population's up 20%, and the budget for police is down 20% because of the defined benefit off the top. So we have less for more.
Right.
And that will only continue, and that's where people will want to get involved when
Right.
it affects them. Oh my God, my uncle died because the fire truck took 20 minutes to get here.
Right. See, and that's the challenge, I think, for us, is because it's difficult to explain to people. It's easier to say, we need more money for that, right? We just have to have more money. Let's raise sales taxes like they did in Stanton. That's how we're going to get over this hump. We know that the problem is the current costs are going to continue to rise. Stanton, one of the financial staff there told me they had their budget totally balanced and they got hit by an increase, not because they were adding staff. They just got hit by an increase from the Orange County Fire Authority and the Sheriff's Department of $1.1 million this year. Not new additional people, just higher costs.
Oops.
No.
Yeah, right.
That's not true. How could that be?
The two metaphors I use for explaining exactly what you're saying to somebody that isn't dialed in, how many bricks can a person carry in a backpack till they can't go anymore? And how many people can fit in a lifeboat before everybody dies?
Yes.
And the mentality of there's something for everybody, keep giving it and letting everybody in.
Right.
We are all sinking, right? We're not dead yet, but we are all as a state going to go that way if we don't do something. Because it will sink us all trying to be everything for everybody.
Well, on that happy note, I will conclude. I think you're right. And I can get your info.
We're very, yeah.
You guys are tight? Okay. And I
We know
can
each other.
find out where your blog is, sir? Great. Thank you. Guys, thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's a lot to ask on a Thursday night. Thanks.